All right, headphones, cardigan, notes. This meeting of the Tortured Poets Department is now in session. So if you're familiar with my other videos, you might know I'm a Swiftie, and I'm also a fan of classic literature. I love Jane Austen in particular. I love a lot of classic literature, but I really like Jane Austen. So, of course, I have Tortured Poets Department songs for the heroines of Jane Austen's novels. So I'm gonna start with the Dashwood sisters. You'll have to wait a little bit to get the Bennets. Marianne Dashwood, I think the song that reminds me of her is LOML. It's just such a heart-wrenching song about someone who you thought was your one true love and gonna be with you for the rest of your life and just wasn't, and it didn't work out. Who's gonna tell me the truth when you blew in with the winds of fate and told me I reformed you? When your impressionist paintings of heaven turned out to be fakes, you took me to hell too. Yeah, that's probably how she felt. And all at once, the ink bleeds, a con man sells a fool a get-love-quick scheme. I mean, don't tell me that's not Willoughby and Marianne's relationship in a nutshell, okay? Once he abandons her, she ends up just plunged into despair, and this line in particular reminds me of her in that period in her life. Dancing phantoms on the terrace, are they secondhand embarrassed that I can't get out of bed 'cause something counterfeits dead? 'Cause that's what she was like, you know, in that period after Willoughby ghosted her and then turned up with someone else, she was so depressed she could not get out of bed. That is her song! Eleanor, on the other hand, she's heartbroken too through a lot of Sense and Sensibility, but she just doesn't let on. And no one would know that she's suffering because she just has this stiff upper lip and goes on about her business, even though, going on about her business means going to parties and going through the motions of trying to find a husband and whatnot. And although she doesn't really pursue that too much, she doesn't get engaged to anyone else, for instance, she really does not let on that her heart is breaking because the guy that she's in love with is engaged to someone else. So naturally, the song that makes me think of Eleanor from this album is I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. It's very much about performing the Eras Tour with a broken heart, but I think, the idea of going through something where you're very much in the public eye and having to kind of perform being happy and not being heartbroken, I feel like that applies really a lot to Eleanor in Sense and Sensibility. I can hold my breath, I've been doing it since he left. You know you're good when you can even do it with a broken heart. And that line towards the end, 'cause I'm miserable and no one even knows, that is Eleanor. She is miserable, and she just does not let on at all. She just keeps it to herself and pretends to be okay. The song I Hate It Here makes me think of Fanny from Mansfield Park. I'm lonely but I'm good, I'm bitter but I swear I'm fine. I'll save all my romanticism for my inner life, and I get lost on purpose. This place made me feel worthless. I mean, they did kind of make her feel worthless. Not so much the place, but the people, and that's kind of what it comes down to, I think. She gets her happy ending she gets with Edmund, and they seem like they'll be happy together, but along the way, the Bertrams really make her feel worthless and kind of treat her like she is the poor relation that they took in out of charity, but they don't have to rub it in her face so much. And then especially that part about, all you'll ever be is my eternal consolation prize, and then the quip about, the 1830s, but without all the racists and getting married off for the highest bid. That getting married off for the highest bid thing, that almost happens to her. It's not quite the 1830s, it's the 18 teens, but she, out of all of Jane Austen's heroines, I think is the one who's pressured the most into a marriage that she doesn't want, purely for the sake of, her family and whatnot. Yes, there's Elizabeth and Mr. Collins, but there's her father who interferes and is like, you don't have to marry him. She has support in rejecting him. And then there's Anne and Mr. Elliot, but I don't think she's necessarily as opposed to the idea of that until he shows his true colors. I think Fanny is the one who is really, out of all of them, the most pressured into this marriage that she knows she doesn't want, and that she is very much made to feel like she has no choice. The song Clara Bow makes me think of Anne Elliot. This is another one that is very specifically about something really obvious, even more so than most of Taylor Swift's songs. It's about the music industry and how it kind of chews up and spits out young women. And, one moment you're this dazzling new wonderful thing that everybody's excited about, and then the next moment you've kind of been halfway forgotten and they're telling new singers, you look like so and so but better. But then it also very much reminds me of the way that women were viewed in the Regency era. And when you were young and you were the exciting new person on the dance floor and super eligible and everything, but then you get just a few years older and all of a sudden you're an old maid. And I think we see that with Anne Elliot more so than any of Jane Austen's other main characters. A little bit also with Charlotte, although it's implied that Charlotte never really had any marriage prospects, whereas Anne did, but was convinced by her family to turn him down, even though she was in love with him. By the time that the novel takes place, she is 27 years old, and she's already seen as basically almost too old to be married and too old to be desirable, which we see kind of reflected in Jane Austen's other works as well. For instance, in Sense and Sensibility, Marianne says that a 27-year-old is too old to feel or inspire passion or emotion, and so, she might settle for a marriage of convenience to an older man. And in Pride and Prejudice, of course, Charlotte is also in her late 20s, and Mr. Collins is probably the only offer that she'll ever get. So women in their late 20s are not necessarily portrayed as too old to find a husband, but they're portrayed as old enough that they're not really desirable anymore. And that just makes me think of, even though it's not like that for marriage anymore, I think in certain areas of life it is kind of like that for women still, and maybe not with, mid to late 20s being the cutoff point, but younger women have more opportunities, for instance, in the entertainment industry, and we see that very much in the song Clara Bow, particularly these lines. Beauty is a beast that roars down on all fours, demanding more. Only when your girlish glow flickers just so do they let you know it's hell on earth to be heavenly. Them's the breaks, they don't come gently. For Lydia Bennet, the song that I picked is But Daddy, I Love Him. Now this is, honestly, I feel like the ending to this song is more optimistic than Lydia's relationship with Wickham because, it's kind of implied everything works out, the parents come around, even my daddy just loves him. Of course, with Lydia and Wickham, he's a terrible guy and the family only tolerates her getting married to him because the alternative is a scandal that would ruin their family, as well as her older sister's chances of marrying people like Bingley and Darcy. So, it's not a even my daddy just loves him kind of situation with Lydia and Wickham. However, I think from her point of view, all she knows is that she was the first one of her sisters to get married, and her mother certainly was very excited. It was sort of a situation where she ran off recklessly and did what she felt like, and for her, at least in the short term, it feels like it all worked out. Now, of course, the reader knows that Wickham is not a good guy and that she probably won't be very happy married to him. But she doesn't seem very concerned about that at the end of the novel. And the narrator of the song, But Daddy, I Love Him, just seems so very stubborn in refusing to take into account what anybody else says about the guy that she is seeing. And Lydia, I think, is very much the same. It wouldn't have mattered how many people told her that Wickham was bad news. She still would have run off with him, because that's Lydia. No, I'm not coming to my senses. I know he's crazy, but he's the one I want. I can so hear her say that. We came back when the heat died down, went to my parents, and they came around. Yeah, they came around, because they didn't really have a choice at that point. When I hear the song, I look in people's windows. I think of Jane Bennet. Now, to be clear, I don't think that she was, being kind of a creep and looking in people's windows literally, to quote the song, like I'm some deranged weirdo. But the emotion behind it, the feeling of the person that you had feelings for just all of a sudden being gone, and you don't really understand why or where he went or what's going on. I feel like that's very much Jane during that middle portion of Pride and Prejudice when Bingley has ghosted her and there's no explanation for it yet. A feather taken by the wind blowing, I'm afflicted by the not knowing. I look in people's windows in case you're at their table. What if your eyes looked up and met mine one more time? I tried searching faces on streets. What are the chances you'd be downtown? You know, that section where she goes to London and she's hoping to meet him there, and they don't meet. And it seems like it's very intentional that they don't meet, like on his part. And she's just left going, like, what happened? What did I do wrong? Why aren't you here? That reminds me so much of this song. And then finally, Elizabeth Bennet. The song that I think of is The Albatross. They tried to warn him about her. They tried to warn you about me. I feel like there's a lot of people trying to poison her and Darcy against each other. On her side of things, there's Wickham telling her all kinds of lies. And on his side, there's Caroline kind of whispering in his ear, being like, she's not a proper, accomplished young lady. And also, of course, Lady Catherine trying to keep them apart. But then he also thinks that his feelings for Elizabeth are something to be resisted and something that is in spite of everything and, you know, against his better judgment. I mean, he tells her as much when he proposes to her. So, you know, she's the albatross, she is here to destroy you. That feels like his perspective on her at the beginning, to be honest. But then, of course, when it comes down to it, even though they had a very negative impression of each other at the beginning, they end up basically changing their mind and they realize that they were wrong. And a big part of that is when she finds out that he prevented Lydia from being ruined and their family's reputation from being ruined. So I crossed my thoughtless heart, spread my wings like a parachute. I'm the albatross, I swept in at the rescue. I feel like that suits them really well. The devil that you know looks now more like an angel. She goes from despising him, or at least having a really bad first impression, to being in love with him. And he goes from, regardless of his feelings about her, definitely having a negative impression of her family, to not really caring and being just so in love with her. Feels good to finally be able to make this video. I'm definitely going to do another one, maybe not specifically about the Jane Austen characters, because we'll have to see just what it inspires, but once I've had a chance to listen to The Life of a Showgirl and to figure out, you know, what does this remind me of, I'll definitely be doing a video about that as well. So if you want to see that and other things that I do, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.